3 years of war, and this is what loyalty looks like. Duke Ronan Blackthorn rode through iron gates that should have opened to celebration. Instead, he found rot. His fiancée gone, his household scattered like ash. The grand estate he'd bled for stood hollow, a monument to betrayal. And waiting in that silence was the one person no one ever noticed, Elin Varel, the mute sister everyone forgot existed. She handed him a letter with hands that didn't shake. Your fiancé left with another man 2 years ago. No one told you. The truth hit harder than any battlefield wound. Want to see how a discarded woman and a broken duke turned scandal into power? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The road back from hell was supposed to end in something better. Ronan had told himself that lie for 3 years. Through mud-choked trenches and nights when the screaming wouldn't stop, he'd held on to one image: home. The Blackthorn estate with its limestone walls catching afternoon sun. Servants bustling through halls that smelled like beeswax and old money. And Celeste, his fiancée, with her porcelain laugh and promises written in perfumed ink. Just survive this. Get home. Start the life you planned. The fantasy died the moment his horse cleared the final hill. The gates stood open, not in welcome, but neglect. One hung crooked on a rusted hinge, scraping dirt every time the wind picked up. The gravel drive was choked with weeds tall enough to brush his stirrups. And the fountain in the main courtyard, the one that used to catch rainbows in its spray, sat dry and cracked like a sun-bleached skull. Ronan sat motionless on his horse, staring. 3 years. 3 goddamn years he'd survived artillery fire and dysentery and watching boys younger than 20 bleed out in his arms. For this. Sir? His aide, Marcus, pulled up beside him. The young man had the decency to look uncomfortable, like he'd just walked in on something private. It's fine. Ronan's voice came out flat. He dismounted, boots hitting gravel with a crunch that echoed too loud in the unnatural quiet. Wait here. Should I said wait. Marcus went silent. Ronan walked toward the main entrance, each step feeling heavier than the last. The front doors were oak, 10 feet tall, carved with the Blackthorn crest, a thorned rose wrapped around a sword. Someone had left them slightly ajar, not flung wide in anticipation, just open, like no one had bothered to close them properly. He pushed through. The entry hall swallowed him in shadows. Dust motes drifted through slanted sunlight from windows no one had cleaned in months. The chandelier overhead, imported Venetian crystal, his mother's pride, was missing a third of its prisms. The marble floor, which used to shine like ice, was scuffed and dull. But it was the silence that gutted him. No footsteps rushing to greet the master of the house. No voices calling out. Just the hollow echo of his own breathing and somewhere distant the irregular drip of water hitting stone. Hello? The word fell dead. Ronan moved deeper into the house, his hand instinctively reaching for a sword that wasn't there. Old habit. He passed the drawing room where his mother used to host her insufferable tea parties, the library where his father had taught him to read military histories, the music room where Celeste had played piano badly but enthusiastically. Every room was the same. Furniture draped in dust covers, portraits of dead Blackthorns staring down with judgment. The smell of disuse, stale air and old wood and something fungal growing in the corners. Where the hell was everyone? The study. He'd start there. Ronan shouldered open the door to his father's old office. His office now, he supposed, since the old man had died while Ronan was away, and stopped short. Someone was sitting at the desk. Not Celeste. Not any of the household staff, he remembered. A woman in a plain gray dress, her dark hair pulled back in a simple knot. She was bent over a ledger, writing something with careful precision. The afternoon light hit her profile, and for a moment Ronan couldn't place her. Then she looked up. Elin, Celeste's younger sister, the quiet one, the one who never spoke. He'd almost forgotten she existed. Where is everyone? Ronan's question came out harsher than intended. Where's Celeste? Where's Mrs. Pemberton? The steward, anyone? Elin set down her pen with deliberate care. She looked at him with eyes that were nothing like her sister's. No sparkle, no performance. Just a steady gray that reminded him of winter clouds. She reached for something on the desk. A piece of paper, already written on. She turned it toward him and pushed it across the mahogany surface. Ronan stepped closer, scanning the neat handwriting. Mrs. Pemberton left 8 months ago. Unpaid. The steward embezzled funds and fled last spring. Most of the staff are gone. Celeste left 2 years ago. He read it twice. Left. The word tasted wrong. Left where? Ellen's expression didn't change. She pulled out another sheet. This one looked prepared, like she'd been expecting this conversation. Her handwriting was smaller here, more cramped, as if she'd tried to fit too much truth onto too little space. She ran away with Lord Garrett Ashford 16 months into your deployment. They went to the continent. She told everyone you'd given your blessing. No one questioned it. The paper crinkled in Ronan's grip. Garrett Ashford. That simpering peacock who'd never held anything heavier than a wine glass. Celeste had run off with him? You're lying. Ellen's jaw tightened, barely, just a fraction, but she didn't look away. She pulled out another paper, then another, and another, a whole stack of them, each one dated, each one signed by someone he'd known. Servants giving notice, creditors demanding payment, letters from his solicitor in the city warning of financial collapse. And at the bottom, a single envelope with his name on it in Celeste's looping script. The seal was broken. Ronan grabbed it, pulled out the card inside. Dearest Ronan, by the time you read this, if you ever do, I'll be far from here. I've tried to wait. Truly I have. But 3 years is too long to put life on hold for someone who might never return. Garrett offers me certainty, happiness, things I can hold on to now, not someday. I hope you'll understand. See. He read it 3 times, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. When? His voice sounded strange. When did this arrive? Ellen wrote quickly. 14 months ago. She left it with the housekeeper. And no one told me. Your military post said personal correspondence was being held to reduce distraction. These were deemed... She hesitated, pen hovering. Non-essential. Non-essential. Ronan laughed, a sound with no humor in it. My fiancée abandoning me is non-essential. Ellen didn't respond. What could she say? He turned away, pacing to the window. Outside, the overgrown garden sprawled like a green cancer. 3 years ago, there'd been rose beds and trimmed hedges and a lawn you could have held a ball on. Now it looked like something out of a Gothic horror novel. Why are you here? He didn't turn around. Why didn't you leave with her? The scratch of pen on paper behind him. Someone had to stay. 4 words, that's all she gave him. Ronan looked back. Ellen sat perfectly still, hands folded on the desk, watching him with that unreadable expression. She was thinner than he remembered, sharper angles, shadows under her eyes, the kind of tired that came from months of carrying weight no one else would touch. How bad is it? He gestured vaguely at the ledgers. The estate. She flipped open the current ledger, turned it toward him. The numbers were methodical, precise, also devastating. Income, nearly 0. The tenant farms had been mismanaged into the ground. Half the properties were behind on taxes. Debts were marked in red ink that seemed to multiply down the page. Expenses, modest but relentless. Ellen had been paying the remaining staff out of... He squinted at the notation. Her own dowry? You used your inheritance to keep this place running? She nodded once. Why? Ellen picked up her pen again. This time her handwriting was faster, less careful. Because it's your home. Because you were bleeding for people who forgot you. Because someone needed to make sure you had something to come back to. The words sat between them like an accusation. Ronan pulled out the chair across from her and sat down hard. His legs had been holding him up through sheer stubbornness. Now they decided to quit. I don't understand. He rubbed his face, feeling 3 days of road grime and the bone-deep exhaustion that came from learning your entire life had collapsed while you were away. We barely knew each other. You and I spoke maybe a dozen times before I left. Why would you... Ellen held up one finger. Wait. She pulled open a drawer, lifted out a bundle of letters tied with plain string. At least 40 of them, maybe more. She set them in front of him with a soft thud. Ronan picked up the top one, his name on the envelope in that same neat handwriting. He opened it. Dear Duke Blackthorne. I hope this letter finds you safe. I wanted to write and tell you that the East Garden has finally bloomed. The roses you planted before leaving have taken root, the red ones especially. I thought you'd want to know that something you cared for is thriving. It went on. Details about the estate, about small repairs she'd managed, about a leak in the library roof and how she'd paid a man from the village to fix it. No drama, no professions of feeling, just information, the kind of letter you'd write to someone you respected, someone you thought deserved to know their home wasn't forgotten. He pulled out another, dated 3 months later. And another, 47 letters total, one every few weeks for 3 years. Did I? Ronan's throat felt tight. Did I ever respond? Elin shook her head. Because I never got them. Another shake. She wrote, the military postal service said personal correspondence from unmarried women was being filtered. Only family and fiancés were approved. You're not... He stopped. Celeste was my fiancée. You would have counted as family. I wasn't married to your family. I was just her sister. That apparently didn't qualify. The injustice of it hit him sideways. This woman had spent 3 years writing him letters he never received, while his actual fiancée had written one goodbye note and vanished. Ronan set the bundle down carefully, like it might shatter. Thank you. The words felt massively insufficient. For staying, for caring, for any of this. Elin's expression softened slightly, not quite a smile, but close. She picked up her pen. You're welcome. Now we need to talk about your inheritance clause. My what? She pulled out another document. This one had his father's seal on it. Your father's will stipulates that you must be married within 1 year of your return to inherit the full estate. Otherwise, it passes to your cousin Edmund. Ronan stared at her. Edmund? That gambling addict who once tried to sell the family silver to pay off a horse racing debt? The same. And I have 1 year. Starting from today, presumably. He started laughing, couldn't help it. The sound echoed off the empty walls, slightly unhinged. So let me understand this correctly. He ticked off on his fingers. I come home from 3 years of war to find my fiancé ran off with another man. My estate is bankrupt. Half my staff are thieves or cowards. And if I don't find a wife in the next 12 months, everything goes to my waste of a cousin. Elin considered this, then wrote, That's accurate, yes. Perfect. Just perfect. Ronan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Any other disasters you'd like to share? Plague of locusts? Spontaneous combustion? She wrote something, hesitated, then showed it to him anyway. Society is expecting you to fail. There are already bets at the gentlemen's clubs about how quickly you'll lose everything. Of course there are. He closed his eyes. How much time do we have before the creditors show up? 3 weeks. Maybe 4 if we're lucky. Ronan sat in silence, trying to organize his thoughts. The war had been brutal, but at least the enemy was obvious. You saw them coming. You knew who to shoot. This was a different kind of battlefield. He looked at Elin, really looked at her. She sat perfectly composed, hands folded, waiting. No panic, no hysteria, just calm competence in the face of complete disaster. Why? The question came out quieter. Why did you really stay? Don't tell me it was duty or obligation. No one is this loyal to a stranger. Elin picked up her pen, put it down, picked it up again. Finally, she wrote slowly, Because I know what it feels like to be forgotten. I know what it's like to be the person no one notices, the one who doesn't matter. I couldn't do that to someone else. Something in Ronan's chest twisted. He'd been so focused on Celeste, beautiful, vibrant Celeste, who lit up every room, that he'd never really seen her sister, the quiet girl who always sat in corners at parties, who communicated through notes because she couldn't speak, who everyone dismissed as forgettable. She'd been the only one who remembered him. I'm sorry. He didn't know what else to say. I'm sorry I never noticed you before. Elin shrugged slightly. She wrote, Most people don't. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it right. She looked up at him then, and for the first time he saw something genuine in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or the faint beginning of hope. The grandfather clock in the corner chose that moment to chime 6 times. The sound was jarring in the quiet. I should let you rest, Elin wrote. Your room is prepared. I've kept it clean. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. She stood, gathering the ledgers with efficient movements. Ronan noticed her hands, ink-stained, calloused. Not the soft hands of a lady of leisure. These were hands that had worked. Elin, she paused, looking back. Will you have dinners with me, tonight? He gestured vaguely at the empty house. I'd rather not eat alone in this mausoleum. She hesitated, clearly torn between proper etiquette and practicality. Then she nodded and wrote, 7 o'clock, the small dining room. It's the only one without water damage. Despite everything, Ronan smiled. I'll be there. She left without fanfare, her footsteps quiet on the marble floor. Ronan sat alone in the study, surrounded by evidence of his collapsed life. The letters Elin had written sat in their neat bundle. On impulse, he picked up another one, dated just 2 months ago. Dear Duke Blackthorn, I hope wherever you are, you're safe. I hope you know that someone is thinking of you, that someone believes you'll come home. The world feels very dark sometimes. But I have to believe that good people survive, that sacrifice means something, that you'll return to find something worth coming back to. I'm trying to make sure of it. His vision blurred. He blamed the dust. Outside, the sun was setting over the ruined gardens. Long shadows stretched across the overgrown lawn. In the distance, he could hear Marcus settling the horses, the familiar sounds of tackle and harness. Ronan looked at the ledgers, the bills, the impossible mountain of debt and disaster. Then he looked at the letters again. Celeste had left him with a 4-line note and broken promises. Elin had left him with proof that someone had cared enough to fight for what he loved, even when he couldn't. The choice wasn't hard. He knew what he had to do. The question was whether she'd agree to it. 7 o'clock arrived with an overcast sky and the first drops of rain. Ronan found the small dining room exactly where he remembered it, down a side hall, past the portrait gallery where stern ancestors glared from oil paintings. Someone, Elin, presumably, had set a fire in the hearth. 2 places were laid at a table that could have seated 12. Candles provided most of the light. Practical, since half the gas lamps in the house no longer worked. Elin was already there, standing by the window. She'd changed into a different dress, still plain, still gray, but cleaner. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. She looked younger like this, less like a governess, more like what she actually was, a woman barely 25 who'd shouldered 3 years of hell alone. She turned when he entered, giving him a slight nod. Thank you for joining me. Ronan pulled out a chair for her. She looked momentarily startled by the gesture, but sat. He took the seat across from her. The meal was simple: soup, bread, cheese, the kind of dinner you made when the kitchen staff consisted of 1 part-time cook in desperation. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Ronan watched her, noting the careful way she ate, the precise movements. Everything about Elin was controlled, measured, like she'd learned early not to take up too much space. Can I ask you something? He set down his spoon. It might be rude. Elin tilted her head slightly. Permission granted was implied. Why don't you speak? Is it a physical issue, or? She didn't look offended. Instead, she pulled out the small notebook she seemed to carry everywhere and wrote, I was born this way. The doctors say there's nothing wrong with my throat or vocal cords. My mind just never connected speech to sound. I can make noise, crying, laughing, but words don't come. Have you ever tried to? Many times. Many doctors. My father spent a fortune trying to fix me. She paused, then added, eventually he gave up and decided I was simply defective. The casual way she wrote defective made Ronan's jaw tighten. You're not defective. Society disagrees, can't speak, can't properly socialize, can't fulfill the basic functions of a wife in polite company. That makes me unmarriageable, which makes me useless. Your father told you that? He didn't have to. I could read it in his face every time he looked at me. Celeste was the valuable daughter. I was the spare who didn't quite work. She wrote it matter-of-factly, like reporting the weather, but Ronan caught the tightness around her eyes. Celeste, he chose his words carefully. She never stood up for you? Elin's pen moved quickly. Why would she? It benefited her to be the favorite, and I never asked her to. I learned early that the less you demand, the less you can be disappointed. Rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the windows. Thunder rumbled somewhere distant. Ronan pushed his bowl aside. I'm going to say something. You're going to think I'm insane. Elin raised an eyebrow. I already think you're insane. You came back to this disaster willingly. Despite everything, he laughed. Fair point. He took a breath. I need a wife. You need... I'm not sure what you need, but I'm guessing it's not to go back to being forgotten by people who should value you. She went very still. I'm proposing a marriage, Ronan continued. Strategic, practical. You help me save the estate and secure my inheritance. I give you position, protection, and a household to run as you see fit. No one will ever dismiss you again. Elin stared at him for a long moment. Then she wrote, You're right. You are insane. Probably, but hear me out. He leaned forward. You've been managing this place for 3 years. You know every debt, every detail, every problem. You're the only reason there's anything left to save, and He gestured at himself. I'm a decorated war hero with a title and enough social currency to make people think twice before crossing us. You want to marry your ex-fiancée's mute sister. Society will crucify you. Society already expects me to fail. At least this way I'll fail on my own terms. He held her gaze. I'm not asking for love or romance. I'm asking for partnership. You clearly know how to run an estate. I know how to face down people who think they're better than me. Together, we might actually pull this off. Elin's pen hovered over the paper. She wrote slowly. What happens when you meet someone you actually want to marry? When you realize you've shackled yourself to damaged goods? Stop. The word came out sharper than intended. Stop calling yourself that. It's what people say. Then people are idiots. Ronan reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close. 3 years ago, I thought I wanted Celeste because she was beautiful and charming and said all the right things. You know what I learned in the war? Pretty words don't mean anything. Action does. Loyalty does. He gestured at the house around them. You stayed. You fought for something that wasn't even yours to fight for. You used your own money to keep my home alive. That's worth more than 1,000 beautiful faces. Elin's eyes were bright. She blinked rapidly, looking away. After a long moment, she wrote, This is the worst proposal in the history of proposals. I know. You're asking me to marry you for business reasons. Yes. You barely know me. True. Your family will hate this. My family is dead except for cousin Edmund, and he's an idiot. The scandal will be enormous. Probably. She set down her pen, looking at him directly. Then she wrote 3 words. I'll do it. Ronan felt something in his chest unclench. Really? Really. She kept writing. But I have conditions. Name them. 1. I run the household finances. No interference. Agreed. 2. If you ever meet someone you actually love, we discuss ending this arrangement. Fine. Same applies to you. 3. You never pity me. I'm not a charity case. I'm your partner or I'm nothing. Ronan extended his hand across the table. Partner? Elin looked at his hand for a moment, then took it. Her grip was firm, calloused, real. They shook on it like business associates, which Ronan supposed they were. Thunder crashed overhead. The storm was directly above them now, rain lashing the windows and sheets. The candles flickered. We should probably discuss the wedding, Ronan said. How quickly can we organize something? Elin pulled out her notebook, already thinking practically. She wrote, 3 weeks minimum for legalities. But we should make it public sooner. Announce the engagement immediately to stop the gossip. Smart! How do you feel about facing society? Terrified. But I've been invisible my whole life. At least now I'll be visible for a reason. That's the spirit. Ronan poured them both wine from the bottle on the table. It was probably one of the few decent vintages left in the cellar. To terrible decisions and desperate partnerships. Elin picked up her glass, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she almost smiled. She raised her glass in return. The wine was good. The fire was warm. And outside, the storm raged against the old house like it was trying to break through the walls. But inside, for the first time in 3 years, Ronan didn't feel quite so alone. He looked at his future wife across the table, this woman who'd fought for his home when no one else cared, who'd written him letters he'd never received, who'd burned through her own future to preserve his. Maybe this was insane. Probably it was. But standing in the wreckage of everything he'd thought he wanted, Ronan was starting to think insane was exactly what he needed. Elin caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing. He took another drink, just thinking that maybe coming home wasn't the disaster I thought. She considered this, then wrote, "Give it a week. You might change your mind." Is that a challenge? It's a guarantee. Wait until you see the state of the North Tower. Despite everything, the debt, the scandal waiting to happen, the monumental task ahead, Ronan found himself laughing. Real laughter this time, not the bitter kind. And Elin, composed and practical Elin, allowed herself the smallest smile in return. The storm would pass. The debts would still be there in the morning. Society would sharpen their knives the moment they caught wind of this engagement. But tonight, in a house that had been dead for 3 years, something was finally coming back to life. And that, Ronan thought, was worth fighting for. The announcement hit society like a cannonball through a drawing room window. Ronan made sure of it. 3 days after his proposal, if you could call that clumsy negotiation a proposal, he walked into the offices of the city's most notorious gossip sheet and bought a full-page advertisement. Duke Ronan Blackthorne is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Elin Varel. The wedding will take place within the month. No flowery language, no explanation, just the facts, printed in bold type for every scandal-hungry reader in the capital to devour with their morning tea. Marcus had looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Sir, perhaps a more traditional announcement through the family solicitor would take weeks and give people time to strategize." Ronan signed the payment draft with a flourish. "I want them off balance, scrambling. By the time they figure out how to react, we'll already be married." The young aide shifted uncomfortably. "And Miss Varel agrees with this approach?" Ronan thought of Elin, sitting in the estate office that morning, methodically writing out a list of creditors and their payment schedules. She'd looked up when he'd explained his plan, considered it for exactly 3 seconds, then wrote, "Do it. They'll crucify us either way. Might as well control the narrative." "She's on board," Ronan told Marcus. "Now go make sure every coffee house and gentleman's club in the city gets a copy by noon." That had been 4 days ago. The backlash was immediate and vicious. By evening, the first letters started arriving. Polite on the surface, poisonous underneath. Lady Weatherby expressing her concern for his hasty decision during what must be a difficult time. Lord Pemberton hoping he'd given proper consideration to the social implications. His father's old business partners wondering if recent hardships had clouded his judgment. Elin sat across from him in the study, reading through them with clinical detachment. Finally, she wrote, "They're all saying the same thing in different words, which is that you're desperate and making a mistake, that I'm unmarriageable, that this will ruin you socially." "Probably." Ronan tossed another letter onto the pile. "Do you care?" She looked at him thoughtfully, then wrote, "I stopped caring what they thought when I was 12 and realized no one was going to defend me." "Do you?" "Not even slightly." He leaned back in his chair. "But we do need to make an appearance. Show them we're not hiding." "Where?" "The Ashford Ball, this Saturday." Elin's pen froze mid-word. She stared at him, then wrote in letters twice the normal size. "The Ashford Ball? As in Lord Garrett Ashford? The man Celeste ran away with?" "The very same." Ronan felt a grim satisfaction at the idea. "His family hosts it every season. Everyone who matters will be there, including, if the rumors are right, Celeste herself. You want to walk into a room full of people who think you're a fool, with your ex-fiancée watching, and announce to society that you're marrying her mute sister. When you put it that way, it sounds dramatic." Elin threw her pen at him. It bounced off his chest. He caught it, grinning. "I'm serious. We need to face them eventually. Better to do it on our terms when they're not expecting it." "This is insane. You keep saying that, yet you keep agreeing to my plans." "Because your plans are the only ones we have." She took her pen back, jabbing it at the paper. "Fine. But I'm not wearing some ridiculous gown and pretending to be something I'm not. Wear whatever you want. Just show up." "I always show up. That's the problem." Saturday arrived with unseasonable heat and Ronan's mounting sense that this was either brilliant or catastrophic. The Ashford estate made his own crumbling manor look like a garden shed. 3 stories of white stone, imported marble columns, gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. Carriages lined the curved drive, each one more ostentatious than the last. Ronan's borrowed carriage, they'd had to sell the good ones to pay debts, looked shabby by comparison. Elin sat across from him, silent as always, wearing a deep blue dress that was elegant in its simplicity. No jewelry except a plain silver bracelet. Her hair was up, revealing the long line of her neck. She looked nervous. Her hands were folded too tightly in her lap. "You don't have to do this," Ronan said quietly. "We could turn around." She pulled out her notebook, writing quickly. "Yes, I do. Running away never solved anything." Speaking from experience, I've been running from who I am my whole life, hiding in corners, making myself small, hoping no one would notice me. It never worked. They noticed anyway. They just chose to look away. The carriage rolled to a stop. Through the window, Ronan could see other guests ascending the wide steps, women in silk and men in evening dress. "Last chance," he said. Elin looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. She wrote, "I'm done being invisible." Then she opened the carriage door before the footman could reach it and stepped out. Ronan followed, offering his arm. She took it, her grip surprisingly steady. They walked up the steps together. The entrance hall was a statement in excess. Chandeliers dripping crystal, walls covered in gold leaf, a string quartet playing in the corner. Everywhere Ronan looked, he saw familiar faces turning to stare. The whispers started immediately. "Is that Blackthorn, back from the war? Heard he's engaged to the sister, the one who can't speak." Desperation, clearly. Elin's hand tightened on his arm, but her face remained calm. She'd learned early how to school her features, Ronan realized. When you couldn't defend yourself with words, you got very good at not showing weakness. They made their way deeper into the ballroom. The music continued, but the energy had shifted. People were watching, waiting to see what would happen. Then the crowd parted, and there she was. Celeste. She looked exactly as Ronan remembered. Golden hair perfectly curled, skin like porcelain, wearing a gown that probably cost more than he'd made in 3 years of military service. But there was something different about her face, a tightness around her eyes, a brittleness to her smile. Standing next to her was Lord Garrett Ashford, looking exactly like the type of man who'd never done an honest day's work in his life. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Celeste stepped forward, her smile fixed in place. "Ronan, what a surprise!" Her voice was bright, performative, the same voice she'd used to charm his father into approving their engagement. "Celeste," he kept his tone neutral, "you're looking well. And you," her eyes flickered to Elin, then back. "I heard the most extraordinary rumor. Surely it can't be true." "That depends on the rumor." "That you're engaged to my sister." She said it like a joke, waiting for him to laugh. Ronan felt Elin go very still beside him. "It's not a rumor," he said clearly. "We're getting married in 3 weeks." The fixed smile cracked slightly. "I see. How unexpected." Garrett chose that moment to insert himself. "Congratulations, old boy, though I must say, after Celeste settling for—" He gestured vaguely at Elin. "Well, it's quite the step down, isn't it?" The insult hung in the air. Ronan felt rage flash hot in his chest, but before he could respond, Elin moved. She let go of his arm, stepped forward, and looked directly at Garrett. Then she pulled out her notebook and wrote something, turned it around, and held it up for him to read. "At least I know how to stay." Garrett's face went red. Several people nearby who'd been straining to listen started whispering furiously. Celeste's laugh was too loud. "Elin, really, this isn't the place for your little notes." Elin turned to her sister, wrote again, "You made it the place the moment you opened your mouth." The whispers intensified. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing," Celeste hissed, dropping the bright tone. "But everyone here knows the truth. You're unmarriageable. You always have been. The only reason Ronan is doing this is because he's desperate, and you were convenient." Elin didn't flinch. She wrote, "And the only reason you came tonight was to see if you still had power over him. Looks like you don't." Ronan watched his former fiancée's carefully constructed facade crumble in real time. This wasn't the shy, forgotten sister she remembered. This was someone who'd found her spine. "How dare you?" Celeste started. "She dares because she's right." Ronan's voice cut through the tension. He stepped beside Elin, presenting a united front. "You left. She stayed. You ran off with a man whose greatest accomplishment is inheriting money he didn't earn. She kept my estate running through sheer force of will. So yes, I'm marrying her. And no, it's not desperation. It's the smartest decision I've made in years." The ballroom had gone quiet. Everyone was listening now. Garrett sputtered. "Now see here." "No, you see here." Ronan let some of the parade ground commander voice come through. "You took advantage of my absence to seduce my fiancée. Fine. That says more about both of you than it does about me. But you don't get to stand in your family's ballroom and insult the woman I'm going to marry. Are we clear?" Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Ronan's eyes, 3 years of war, 3 years of watching men die, made him step back. "Crystal clear," he muttered. Celeste grabbed his arm. "We should go." Her voice was tight. "I'm feeling unwell." They retreated through the crowd, leaving Ronan and Elin standing alone in the center of the ballroom. For a moment, nobody moved. Then an older woman Ronan didn't recognize started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Someone else joined in. Then another. It wasn't universal. Plenty of people still looked scandalized. But it was enough. Ronan turned to Elin. "Want to dance?" She looked startled. Wrote, "I don't know how." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out." He offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. They moved onto the dance floor as the quartet struck up a waltz. Ronan had exactly 2 lessons in dancing before he'd left for war, both of which he'd forgotten. Elin clearly had even less training. They stumbled through the first few steps, trying to find the rhythm. "Your left foot," Ronan murmured. "No, your other left." Elin stepped on his toe, then looked mortified. He grinned. "At least you're not shooting at me. I've had worse partners." She almost smiled, and they tried again. By the 3rd rotation, they'd found something that approximated a waltz. It wasn't graceful. They were definitely offbeat. But they were moving together, and that was enough. "You know what the best part of this is?" Ronan said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "What?" She'd pulled out a tiny notebook she'd tucked into her sleeve, writing one-handed while they danced. "Neither of us has to pretend anymore. We're exactly who we are. No performance. No lies." Elin looked up at him, and he saw something shift in her expression, the guardedness easing slightly. She wrote, "Is that why you really proposed? Not just the inheritance?" "Maybe." He spun her carefully. "Or maybe I'm tired of beautiful lies and I wanted an honest partnership for once. Even if it scandalizes society? Especially then." The music swelled. Other couples had joined them on the floor now, the initial shock wearing off, but Ronan barely noticed them. He was watching Elin, seeing the woman who'd fought for his home when she had no reason to, who'd written him letters he never received, who faced down her own sister without flinching. The song ended. They stopped, slightly breathless, still holding hands. Then someone cleared their throat beside them. Ronan turned to find an older gentleman with an elaborate mustache and the kind of expensive suit that screamed old money. "Duke Blackthorne, might I have a word?" It wasn't really a request. Ronan glanced at Elin. She nodded slightly, stepping back. He followed the man to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "I'm Lord Hastings," the man said without preamble. "I knew your father. Good man. Terrible businessman, but good man." "I'm aware." Ronan kept his tone neutral. "I'm also aware that you're drowning in debt and about to lose everything." Hastings studied him with sharp eyes. "The question is whether you're worth saving. I'm not looking for charity." "Good, because I'm not offering it." Hastings pulled out a card, handed it over. "I'm offering a business opportunity. Your estate has mineral rights you're not exploiting, timber reserves you're not harvesting, land you're not using efficiently. I can help you turn those assets into income. In exchange, I take 30% for the first 5 years." Ronan looked at the card. "That's steep." "That's fair, considering I'm the only one offering. Every other investor thinks you're a lost cause." He paused. "But I saw how you handled Ashford just now. And I've heard stories about what you did in the war. You've got spine. That's worth betting on. Why tell me this now? Because watching you dance with that girl, your fiancée, I saw something I don't see often in this crowd. Genuine partnership. You treat her like an equal. That tells me you're smart enough to recognize value when others don't. Hastings adjusted his cufflinks. My office. Monday morning. Bring your fiancée. She clearly knows more about your finances than you do. Before Ronan could respond, the man walked away. Ronan stood there, staring at the card. This could be the break they needed. Or it could be another disaster. Elin appeared at his elbow. She'd watched the whole exchange. She wrote, "What did he want?" "To save us. Maybe." Ronan showed her the card. "What do you think?" She studied it, her face unreadable. Then wrote, "I think we don't have the luxury of saying no, but I want to review any contract before you sign anything." Deal. The evening wore on. They made small talk with people who were clearly still processing the scandal. Some were cautiously friendly. Others were openly hostile. Most were just watching, waiting to see if Ronan would crash and burn. Around midnight, as they were finally preparing to leave, a servant approached with a note on a silver tray. Elin took it, read it, and her face went pale. She handed it to Ronan. "Meet me in the East Garden. Alone. We need to talk. See Celeste." Ronan crumpled the note. "Absolutely not." Elin grabbed his arm, wrote quickly. "Go." "What?" "No, she doesn't get to summon me like—" "Go. Hear what she has to say. Otherwise, she'll keep trying. Better to deal with it now." "I don't want to deal with it. I want to go home." Elin's expression was firm. She wrote, "You need closure. So do I. Go talk to her. I'll wait by the carriage." Ronan wanted to argue, but he recognized that look. She'd made up her mind. 5 minutes, he conceded. That's all she gets? The East Garden was exactly the kind of romantic setting Celeste would choose. Moonlight, roses, a marble fountain. She was waiting by a bench, looking ethereal and calculated all at once. "You came," she said softly. "You asked. I'm here. What do you want?" "I want to explain." She stepped closer. "What I did, leaving you, it was a mistake. I see that now. Took you long enough. Garrett isn't who I thought he was." Her voice cracked artfully. "He's shallow and controlling, and I've been miserable. Coming back here tonight, seeing you again, I realized what I lost." Ronan studied her. 3 years ago, this speech would have wrecked him. Now he just felt tired. "So you want me to what? Call off my engagement? Take you back?" "I want you to forgive me." Tears welled in her eyes, perfectly timed. "I made a terrible choice. But we loved each other once. That has to count for something." "It did, 3 years ago." He took a step back. "But that's done now." "Because of Elin?" Celeste's mask slipped slightly. "My sister?" "Ronan, be serious. She can't speak. She can't function in society. You need someone who can stand beside you as a proper duchess." "I need someone loyal, someone honest, someone who doesn't abandon ship the moment things get difficult." Each word landed like a hammer. "She's worth 10 of you." Celeste's face twisted. "You're going to regret this. Marrying someone like her, damaged, defective. People will never accept it." "Then I guess I'll find new people." He turned to leave. "She doesn't love you, you know." Celeste's voice turned sharp. "This is just survival for her. The moment something better comes along—" At least she was honest about it. Ronan looked back. "You lied. You promised forever and delivered 4 lines in a broken engagement. I'll take honest survival over pretty lies any day." He left her standing in the garden, looking smaller somehow than he remembered. When he reached the carriage, Elin was waiting. She took one look at his face and wrote, "How did it go?" "She wanted me back." Elin's pen paused. "Oh." "I said no." Her eyes widened slightly. "Why?" "Because I meant what I said in there. You're worth 10 of her. 100. He climbed into the carriage, suddenly exhausted. "Besides, we have a deal. Partner, remember?" Elin followed him in, sitting across from him in the dim interior. The carriage lurched into motion. She wrote, "She's beautiful, charming, everything a duke's wife should be. She's also a liar and a coward." Ronan leaned his head back against the seat. I'm done with beautiful lies. They rode in silence for a while, the sounds of the city fading as they headed toward the estate. Finally, Elin wrote, "Thank you for what you said to Garrett. And Celeste, you didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did. We're in this together." He looked at her seriously. "That means when someone comes after you, they come after me too, and I don't lose gracefully." She almost smiled, then wrote, "Lord Hastings' offer. Do you trust him?" "No, but he's right that we don't have better options." Ronan rubbed his face. "We'll go Monday. Look at the numbers. If it's a trap, we walk away. And if it's legitimate, then maybe we actually have a shot at pulling this off." The carriage hit a rut, jostling them both. Outside, the first hint of dawn was touching the sky. Elin stared out the window, her profile sharp in the weak light. Then she wrote something and showed it to him. "I've never had anyone fight for me before. Not like that. It felt strange. Good strange or bad strange? I'm not sure yet. Honest, always honest." Ronan found himself smiling despite the exhaustion, despite the mountain of problems waiting for them back home. "Well," he said, "you've got at least 3 weeks to figure it out before you're stuck with me permanently." Elin looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Not love, too soon for that, too complicated, but recognition, understanding. Two people who'd been forgotten, overlooked, and written off, deciding to bet on each other anyway. The carriage rolled through the gates of Blackthorn Estate, just as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the crumbling walls gold. It still looked like a disaster, but for the first time since he'd come home, Ronan thought maybe disaster was just the beginning. They had exactly 2 days to prepare for the meeting with Lord Hastings before everything went sideways. The first sign of trouble came Monday morning, 3 hours before their appointment. Ronan was in the study reviewing contracts when Marcus burst in without knocking, his face the color of old parchment. "Sir, we have a problem." Ronan looked up from the timber rights documentation. "Define problem." "Cousin Edmund is here, with his lawyer, and about 30 witnesses." The bottom dropped out of Ronan's stomach. "What?" "He's claiming the estate. Now. Says you forfeited your inheritance rights by—" Marcus swallowed hard. "By engaging in immoral conduct." "Immoral conduct?" Ronan stood slowly. "Elaborate." "He's saying your engagement to Miss Varel is fraudulent, that you're only marrying her to meet the deadline in your father's will, and that it violates the spirit of the inheritance clause, which specified a legitimate union entered in good faith." Ronan felt ice slide down his spine. "Where is he?" "The front hall. He's brought a magistrate." Of course he had. Edmund never did anything halfway when there was money involved. Ronan found them exactly where Marcus said, his cousin holding court in the entry hall like he already owned the place. Edmund Blackthorn was everything Ronan wasn't. Soft around the middle, with thinning hair, and the kind of face that looked perpetually calculating. Next to him stood a severe-looking man in black robes, probably the magistrate, and behind them a cluster of what looked like professional witnesses. Edmund's smile was oil-slick smooth. "Cousin, how good of you to join us. Get out of my house." "Your house?" Edmund made a show of looking around. "I'm not sure that's accurate anymore. You see, I've been doing some research into Father's will, our father, rest his soul, and it's quite clear that the inheritance was contingent on you marrying appropriately, not desperately cobbling together a sham marriage to a woman no one else would have." "Careful." Ronan's voice dropped. "That's my fiancée you're insulting." "Fiancée?" Edmund laughed. "Please, everyone knows you're only marrying the mute Varel girl because you're out of options. That's not a marriage. That's a business transaction, and business transactions don't satisfy the requirements of the will." The magistrate stepped forward, consulting a document. "Duke Blackthorn, I'm required to investigate claims of inheritance fraud. Mr. Edmund Blackthorn has presented evidence suggesting your engagement was arranged purely to circumvent estate law rather than entered into with genuine matrimonial intent." "That's insane." "Is it?" Edmund pulled out a newspaper, the same gossip sheet where Ronan had placed his announcement. "You return from war, discover your fiancé has fled, and within 3 days you're engaged to her sister, a woman you barely knew? That's not romance, cousin. That's panic." Ronan felt the trap closing. Because Edmund wasn't wrong. It had been panic, initially. A desperate move to save everything from collapsing. The fact that it had become something more complicated didn't change the optics. "Where's Elin?" he asked Marcus quietly. "In the office. I didn't want to—" "Get her. Now!" While Marcus disappeared, Ronan faced down his cousin. "Even if what you're claiming were true, and it's not, you'd have to prove it. Good luck with that." "Oh, I don't need to prove it." Edmund's smile widened. "I just need to create enough doubt that the magistrate delays the inheritance transfer. And once that happens, once people start investigating your finances and your desperate situation, the truth will come out on its own." The magistrate cleared his throat. "I'm afraid I do need to ask some questions, Your Grace, starting with the nature of your relationship with Miss Varel prior to your engagement." This was going to be a disaster. Then Elin walked in. She took in the scene immediately. Edmund's smug expression, the magistrate's stern face, the witnesses crowding the hall. Her jaw tightened. She walked straight to Ronan's side, pulled out her notebook, and wrote something. She held it up for everyone to see. "What's happening?" "My cousin is attempting to contest the inheritance," Ronan said clearly. "He's claiming our engagement is fraudulent." Elin's eyes narrowed. She wrote again, this time faster. "On what grounds?" Edmund laughed. "On the grounds that it's obvious, my dear. No offense, but you're hardly the type of woman a duke would choose if he had any other options." The words hung in the air like poison. Ronan saw Elin's hand tighten on her pen, her knuckles going white, but her face remained perfectly composed. She wrote, "And you're the type of man who gambles away family silver and needs to steal an inheritance because you can't earn anything on your own merit?" One of the witnesses snickered. Edmund's face went red. "How dare you?" Elin kept writing, holding up each note like evidence. "I've been managing this estate for 3 years while you were bleeding your own holdings dry. I have records, ledgers, proof that I kept this place running when everyone else abandoned it. What have you contributed besides greed?" The magistrate looked uncomfortable. "Miss Varel, while I appreciate your defense, the question remains whether this engagement was entered into with genuine marital intent or purely as a legal maneuver." Elin looked at Ronan, really looked at him, like she was weighing something. Then she wrote 5 words and showed them to the room. "Ask me if I care." Edmund blinked. "Excuse me?" She kept writing. "You want to know if this is a real engagement? Fine. Here's your answer. I don't care what you think. I don't care what society thinks. I'm marrying him because he's the only person who's ever treated me like I matter. That's more real than half the marriages in this city." The magistrate frowned. "That's not exactly—" "And if you want to contest it," Elin continued writing furiously, "then investigate. Pull every record. Question every servant. You'll find that I've been the only person fighting for this estate while the rest of you vultures circled. Including you, Edmund. I have documentation of your attempts to bribe the steward into selling off assets. Want me to produce that evidence?" Edmund's face went from red to pale. "That's slander." "It's fact. I have the letters." "She did?" Ronan stared at her. When had she found time to collect evidence against Edmund? The magistrate looked between them, clearly not enjoying his role in this drama. "Miss Varel, do you swear that your engagement to Duke Blackthorn is genuine?" Elin met his eyes and nodded firmly, then wrote, "I swear it. He's an idiot, and we're probably going to fail spectacularly. But it's real." Despite everything, Ronan almost laughed. Only Elin would defend their engagement by calling him an idiot. The magistrate sighed. "Mr. Edmund Blackthorn, unless you have concrete evidence of fraud, actual proof, not speculation, I cannot delay the inheritance transfer based solely on your concerns. But, however," the magistrate turned to Ronan, "I will be monitoring this situation. If any evidence emerges that this marriage is indeed fraudulent, the estate will immediately transfer to Mr. Edmund Blackthorn. Am I clear?" "Crystal." Ronan kept his voice level. Edmund looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Elin wrote quickly. "Get out of this house. You're trespassing. I have every right to us. You have no rights here. This is still Ronan's property until proven otherwise, and I'm asking you to leave. Politely." The unspoken threat, that she could ask less politely, hung in the air. Edmund gathered his witnesses and lawyer with poor grace. As he passed Ronan, he muttered, "You're going to regret this, both of you." "Probably," Ronan agreed, "but not as much as you're going to regret wasting everyone's morning." The door slammed behind them. The moment they were gone, the strength seemed to drain out of Elin. She sat down hard on the nearest chair, her hands shaking slightly. Ronan knelt beside her. "You okay?" She shook her head, then nodded, then shrugged. Pulled out her notebook with trembling fingers. "I don't know, that was terrifying." "You were magnificent. I wanted to throw up. You threatened him with evidence and called me an idiot. That's magnificent in my book." She managed a weak smile, then wrote, "Do we really have time to meet with Lord Hastings after this?" Ronan checked his pocket watch. They had 40 minutes. "We go. Edmund tried to rattle us, but we can't let him derail everything. We need Hastings' deal now more than ever." "What if it's another trap?" "Then we spring it and deal with the consequences." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, let's go save this disaster." Lord Hastings' office was in the financial district, occupying the entire top floor of a building that reeked of old money and new power. They were shown into a conference room with windows overlooking the city, where Hastings sat reviewing documents with two associates. He looked up as they entered. "Blackthorne, Miss Varel punctual. I appreciate that." "We had a complication this morning," Ronan said as they sat. "Edmund?" Hastings waved it away. "I heard. He's been making noise all over town. Don't worry about him. If I'm backing you, he won't dare follow through." "If?" "Sit. Let's talk business." Hastings pushed a contract across the table. "I've had my people review your holdings. The estate is a mess, but there's potential. Timber, mineral rights, agricultural land you're not utilizing. With proper management, you could be profitable within 18 months. Elin picked up the contract, reading quickly. Her expression grew increasingly skeptical. She pulled out her notebook. "This gives you controlling interest in all resource extraction for 5 years. That's excessive." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "It's proportional to the risk I'm taking." "The risk we're taking," Elin wrote. "We're putting up the land. You're putting up capital. That should be a 50-50 split, not 70-30 in your favor." "Miss Varel, I don't think you understand how these arrangements typically—" She cut him off by writing furiously and shoving the notebook across the table. "I understand perfectly. You're betting that we're desperate enough to accept terrible terms because we have no leverage. You're wrong." Hastings leaned back, studying her. "Am I?" "Yes." Ronan had been reading over Elin's shoulder. "Because we have something you want. You said it yourself. Everyone thinks we're a lost cause. If we succeed, you look like a genius for backing us. That's worth more than 30%. And if you fail, I lose everything." "You're Lord Hastings." Elin wrote quickly. "You don't invest what you can't afford to lose. 50-50 split. 3-year term, not 5. And we maintain final approval on all resource extraction plans." One of Hastings' associates coughed. "Sir, those terms are acceptable." Hastings smiled slowly. "You've got spine, Miss Varel. I like that." He gestured to his associates. "Draft a new contract. 50-50 partnership, 3-year term, mutual approval required for major decisions." Ronan felt some of the tension ease. "Just like that?" "Just like that. I didn't get where I am by squeezing people until they broke. I got here by recognizing talent and betting on it." Hastings stood, extending his hand to Elin. "You've got talent, young lady. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Elin shook his hand, looking surprised. As they left the office an hour later, contract signed and sealed, Ronan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. "We did it," he said as they climbed into the carriage. "We actually pulled it off." Elin was reading through their copy of the contract one more time. She wrote, "Don't celebrate yet. We still have to make this work, and Edmund's not going to give up. Let him try. We've got backing now, legitimate business prospects. He can't touch us." "Can't he?" The question sat heavy between them. The answer came 2 days later, at the worst possible moment. Ronan had arranged a dinner party, their official engagement celebration. Nothing massive, just 30 carefully selected guests from the social circles that mattered. A chance to show society they were serious, stable, united. The dinner was being held at the estate, which meant 3 days of frantic preparation. They'd hired temporary staff, cleaned the main dining room until it gleamed, brought in flowers to hide the worst of the decay. Elin had planned the menu with military precision, keeping costs low while maintaining appearances. By 7 o'clock, guests were arriving. Lords and ladies in evening dress, offering congratulations that ranged from genuine to poisonous. Ronan played the gracious host while Elin circulated with her notebook, communicating through written replies that were sharp and honest in ways that clearly surprised people. Everything was going smoothly. Then Celeste walked in. She wasn't on the guest list, neither was Garrett, but there they were, standing in the doorway like they belonged. Ronan felt his jaw tighten. "What are you doing here?" "We were invited," Garrett said smoothly. He showed an invitation, a perfect forgery of the ones Ronan had sent out. "By whom?" "Does it matter?" Celeste's smile was brittle. "We're here now. Surely you won't make a scene by throwing us out in front of everyone." She was right, and she knew it. Making a scene would only feed the gossip. "Fine," Ronan said through gritted teeth. "Stay, because any problems and you'll regret it." They moved into the drawing room where pre-dinner drinks were being served. Ronan found Elin immediately, warning her with a look. She spotted Celeste and went still. Then wrote, "I see her. Just stay close to me." The dinner seating was a disaster. Someone, Ronan suspected Edmund, working with Celeste, had switched the place cards. Instead of Elin seated beside him, he found Celeste on his right and Lady Pemberton, one of society's most vicious gossips, on his left. Elin was relegated to the far end of the table, seated between two elderly gentlemen who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Ronan tried to catch her eye, but she was already settling in with quiet dignity. The first course arrived. Conversation flowed, polite and venomous by turns. Celeste kept touching his arm, leaning close, laughing too loud at things that weren't funny. "I was just telling Lady Pemberton about that summer we spent at the coast," she said brightly. "Do you remember, Ronan? Before you left for the war?" "Vaguely. We were so happy then," her voice carried down the table. "I often wonder what might have been if circumstances had been different." Lady Pemberton smiled like a shark. "Oh? I had heard you'd found happiness elsewhere, Miss Varel." The use of Miss Varel was deliberate. She was still using her maiden name, not Ashford. Ronan filed that information away. "Happiness is complicated," Celeste sighed dramatically. "Sometimes we make choices we regret." Down the table, Elin's face remained carefully neutral. The second course came, then the third. Celeste kept up a running commentary about their past, painting a picture of a grand romance interrupted by cruel fate. Several guests were eating it up, giving Ronan pitying looks. Then Garrett spoke up from his position mid-table. "I must say, Blackthorn, it's quite admirable how you've adapted to your circumstances. Not every man could handle such a reduction in prospects." The table went quiet. "I'm sorry?" Ronan's voice was dangerously soft. "Well, going from someone like Celeste to—" He gestured vaguely toward Elin. "Well, it's quite the adjustment. But then I suppose beggars can't be choosers." Elin's hands were very still on her lap. Lady Pemberton tittered. "Mr. Ashford does have a point. The situation is rather unusual." That's when Elin stood up. Every eye turned to her. She pulled out her notebook, writing quickly. Then she walked to the head of the table and placed it in front of Ronan where everyone could see. "Read it aloud." He looked at what she'd written, then up at her face. She nodded firmly. Ronan cleared his throat. "Miss Varel has written something she'd like me to share." He read, "You're all sitting here judging a relationship you know nothing about, whispering about whether it's real, whether I'm good enough, whether Ronan is desperate. Let me clear something up. This engagement is real. Not because it started as some great romance, but because it's built on something more honest than that. Mutual respect, shared goals, and the recognition that we're both better together than apart." He continued, his voice steady. "And for those of you who think I'm not good enough to be a duchess, you're right. I'm not polished. I can't make small talk or charm people with pretty words, but I can manage an estate that was falling apart. I can spot a fraud from across a room. And I can stand here in front of all of you and tell the truth, even when lies would be more comfortable." The room was dead silent. Ronan kept reading. "So here's the truth. Celeste abandoned Ronan when he was at war, bleeding for people like you. I stayed. I fought for his home when no one else cared. And now we're building something together. If that's not enough for you, if you need grand romance and fairy tale love to validate our engagement, then you can leave. Because we're not performing for anyone anymore. He set the notebook down. Elin stood perfectly still, her chin raised, meeting every eye that dared look at her. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Lord Hastings, seated near the middle of the table, started clapping. Slow, deliberate applause. "Bravest damn thing I've heard in years," he said. "Cheers to that." A few others joined in tentatively at first, but not everyone. Celeste's face had gone white. "How dare you? How dare I?" Elin grabbed the notebook, writing furiously. "How dare you? You left him. You broke every promise. And now you're sitting at his table trying to sabotage the life he's trying to build. What did you think would happen?" "I loved him." "No," Elin wrote. "You loved what he could give you. There's a difference." Celeste stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. "I won't sit here and be insulted by—" "By who?" Ronan's voice cut through. He stood as well, moving to stand beside Elin. "By the woman who saved everything you threw away? Sit down or leave, Celeste, but you don't get to play victim here." Garrett rose as well. "Now see here, Blackthorn. No, you see here." Ronan let the full force of 3 years of command come through. "You came into my home uninvited. You insulted my fiancée. You tried to make this about your regrets and your drama. I'm done being polite." He gestured to the door. "Get out, both of you." "You can't just—" "I can. This is my house, my dinner, my life you're trying to ruin." His voice dropped. "Leave. Now." For a moment, it looked like Garrett might argue. Then he saw something in Ronan's eyes, the same thing that had made him back down at the Ashford ball, and thought better of it. He grabbed Celeste's arm. "Come on, this is beneath us anyway." They left in a storm of rustling silk and wounded pride. The remaining guests sat in stunned silence. Ronan looked around the table. "Anyone else want to leave? Now's your chance." A few people shifted uncomfortably, but nobody moved. "Good. Then let's finish this meal like civilized people." He sat back down, pulling out the chair beside him for Elin. "Starting with my fiancée in her proper place." She took the seat, her hand shaking slightly. The dinner continued, but the energy had completely changed. The guests who'd been whispering and judging now looked uncertain. The ones who'd defended them looked triumphant. By the time dessert arrived, conversations had resumed, though the topics carefully avoided anything controversial. When the last guest finally departed around midnight, Ronan closed the door and leaned against it. That was a disaster. Elin, standing in the now empty hall, wrote, "That was a victory. We just threw out half of society's most influential people. We showed them we won't be bullied. That's worth more than their approval." Ronan looked at her, really looked at her. Still in her evening dress, hair slightly disheveled from the stress, ink stains on her fingers from all the writing. "You were incredible tonight." She shook her head. "I was terrified." "Bravery isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway." He pushed off the door. "Thank you for defending us, for telling the truth when lies would have been easier." Elin met his eyes, and something passed between them. Something that felt like trust deepening into something more complicated. She started to write something, then stopped, started again. Finally showed him. "This is becoming real, isn't it? Not just strategy, actually real." Ronan felt his heart kick. "Yeah, I think it is." "Does that scare you?" "Terrifies me." "Good." She almost smiled. "I'd be worried if you weren't scared." They stood in the empty hallway, surrounded by the ghosts of departed guests and the echo of the evening's drama. Then Marcus appeared, looking apologetic. "Sir, there's someone at the door. Says it's urgent." It was past midnight. Who would— The knock came again, loud and insistent. Ronan opened the door to find a young man in messenger's livery, rain-soaked and breathing hard. "Message for Duke Blackthorn, from the magistrate's office." Ice slid down Ronan's spine. At this hour, the messenger handed over a sealed envelope. "I was told to deliver it immediately, sir." Ronan broke the seal, reading quickly. His blood went cold. Elin touched his arm. What is it? He handed her the letter. Duke Blackthorn. New evidence has come to light regarding your engagement to Miss Elin Varel. Specifically, correspondence suggesting the arrangement was negotiated as a business contract with no emotional foundation. A hearing has been scheduled for 3 days, hence to determine if your marriage qualifies under the terms of your father's will. Failure to appear will result in immediate forfeiture of the estate. Magistrate Crawford. Elin looked up, her face pale. Edmund. Has to be. Ronan's mind raced. But what correspondence? We were careful. Everything was verbal or... He stopped. The letters. Elin's 47 letters. Where are they? He asked urgently. The letters you wrote me? In my room. The bundle you read. Why? Because if Edmund found them, he could twist them, make them look like evidence of one-sided attachment. Proof that you were pursuing me for practical reasons, not emotional ones. Elin's eyes widened. She ran. Ronan followed, taking the stairs 2 at a time. They burst into her room, simple, sparse, everything neatly organized. The desk drawer where she'd kept the letters was open, empty. Elin made a sound, small, broken. She grabbed her notebook. They're gone, all of them. When? How? The dinner. Everyone was downstairs. Someone could have... She stopped, realization dawning. Celeste. She was late to dinner. Said she got lost looking for the powder room. Of course, it was perfect. Celeste helps Edmund get evidence, destroys Ronan's inheritance, and probably gets some revenge in the process. We can explain them, Ronan said, trying to sound confident. Tell the magistrate the truth about what they were. Elin shook her head violently. She wrote with shaking hands. You don't understand. Those letters weren't just updates about the estate. I wrote about feelings, hope, things I shouldn't have written to someone who was engaged to my sister. Elin, they'll use them to prove I was manipulating you, that I saw your vulnerability and exploited it. Combined with the timing of our engagement, it will look exactly like what Edmund is claiming. She was right. He could see it now. The letters presented as evidence of calculated pursuit, his quick engagement as proof he'd fallen for it, the whole thing framed as a cynical attempt to game the inheritance law. And the worst part? There was enough truth in it that they couldn't fully deny it. Their engagement had started as strategy. The fact that it had become something more wouldn't matter if they couldn't prove it. Ronan pulled Elin close. She was trembling. We'll figure this out, he said into her hair. We'll find a way. But even as he said it, he felt the walls closing in. 3 days until the hearing. 3 days to prove something he wasn't sure they could prove. That what had started as survival had transformed into something worth fighting for. 3 days turned into 72 hours of controlled panic. Ronan barely slept. When he did, he dreamed of losing everything. The estate sold off piece by piece, Elin's face as she walked away, Edmund's triumphant laughter echoing through empty halls. He'd wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, and find her already awake in the study, surrounded by ledgers and documents, searching for something they could use. By the second day, they'd exhausted every legal angle. Their solicitor, a nervous man named Pembroke, who kept mopping his forehead with a handkerchief, had reviewed the stolen letters and delivered his verdict with the enthusiasm of a funeral director. The content is problematic, Your Grace. Miss Varel writes extensively about her admiration for you, her desire to preserve your home, and her hope that you might notice her efforts. Combined with the rapid timeline of your engagement, it paints a picture of premeditated pursuit. She was trying to help, Ronan snapped. I understand that, but the magistrate will see calculation, especially this passage. He adjusted his spectacles, reading from a copy Edmund had helpfully provided. I find myself hoping that when you return you'll see what I've done, that you'll understand someone was fighting for you when no one else cared. Perhaps then you'll look at me differently. Elin's hand tightened on her pen. She'd gone pale. That's not manipulation, Ronan said. That's honesty. Perhaps, but honesty that preceded a strategically advantageous engagement by mere months? Pembroke shook his head. I'm sorry, Your Grace. Unless you can prove genuine emotional attachment that predates the inheritance crisis, the magistrate will likely rule against you. After he left, Elin wrote, He's right. We can't win this. Yes, we can. How? We can't prove feelings that didn't exist yet. Ronan paced the study, thinking. The truth was complicated. Their engagement had started as strategy, yes, but somewhere in the disaster of the past weeks, it had transformed into something neither of them had expected. The problem was proving it. Then it hit him. We don't prove the past, he said slowly. We prove the present. Elin looked up. What? Edmund's argument is that our engagement is fake, a business arrangement with no real foundation. So we show the magistrate and everyone else that it's real now. Undeniably real. How do we do that? Ronan pulled out a chair sitting across from her. The hearing is public, right? Open court? She nodded. Then we use that. We don't defend ourselves with documents and lawyers. We tell the truth. All of it. Everything we've been through, everything we've built, everything this has become. He leaned forward. We make them see us, Elin. Not as a scandal or a strategy, but as two people who found something worth fighting for in the middle of a disaster. That's not a legal argument. No, it's better. It's human. He grabbed her hand. Edmund wants a bloodless contract dispute. We give them a story. We make them understand why we're doing this. The magistrate won't care about stories. Maybe not. But the people watching will. And public opinion matters. If we win the crowd, the magistrate will think twice about ruling against us. Elin stared at him like he'd suggested they set themselves on fire. Then she wrote, That's insane. Probably. But everything we've done has been insane. Why stop now? She pulled her hand back, writing furiously. You're asking me to stand in front of everyone and expose myself. Everything I've felt. Everything I've hidden. You know what they'll do with that? They'll tear me apart. They're already tearing you apart. At least this way you get to control the narrative. I can't. Yes, you can. No, she underlined it 3 times. You don't understand, threatened Edmund with evidence in your own house. You're not invisible anymore. You haven't been for a while. She was shaking her head, but he could see the fear warring with something else in her eyes. I know it's terrifying, he continued, but hiding didn't work. Playing by their rules didn't work. So we break the rules. We do what no one expects. We fight. What if we fail? Then we fail spectacularly, and at least we go down swinging. Elin sat very still, her pen hovering over the notebook. Finally, she wrote, What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we turn the hearing into a declaration, not a defense, but an offense. We don't justify our engagement. We celebrate it. We show them exactly why we chose each other and dare them to call it fake. That's not how court proceedings work. It is if we make it work. She looked at him for a long moment, then wrote, You're completely insane. Is that a yes? Another pause, then, It's a maybe. Let me think about it. We have 1 day left. I know. That night, Ronan found her in the garden. The overgrown garden that still looked like a disaster, but slightly less so since they'd started working on it. She was sitting on a stone bench staring at the tangled rose bushes. He sat beside her without speaking. After a long silence, she pulled out her notebook and wrote, I keep thinking about those letters, the ones Edmund stole. What about them? I was so careful. I never said anything too personal in the estate correspondence. Never showed weakness. But those letters... She stopped, started again. Those were different. I wrote them thinking no one would ever read them. That you'd never come back, or if you did, you wouldn't care. I care. Why? She turned to face him. Why do you care? I'm not beautiful like Celeste. I can't charm people at parties. I'm difficult and stubborn, and I can't even speak. What could you possibly... Stop. He caught her wrist gently. You really don't see it, do you? See what? That you're the strongest person I've ever met. That you held together an entire estate through sheer determination. That you tell the truth even when lies would be easier. That you see people, really see them, in ways most people never bother to. Her eyes were bright. You want to know why I care? Ronan continued. Because in 3 years of war, nobody wrote to me like you did. Nobody gave a damn about whether the roses bloomed or the roof leaked. Celeste sent perfumed letters full of nothing. You sent honest updates about everything I'd left behind, like it mattered, like I mattered. Elin was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. So yeah, I care. And not because I'm desperate or because you're convenient. I care because somewhere in this disaster, I started seeing you, the real you. And she's worth everything we're about to risk. She wiped her face roughly, then wrote with shaking hands, I'm going to do it. Tomorrow. The hearing? I'll tell them everything. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She showed him the next line. Just promise me something. Anything. Don't let me hide. If I start backing down, push me forward. He took her hand, ink-stained and calloused. I promise. They sat in the garden until the stars came out, not speaking, just being. And for the first time since the letters were stolen, Ronan felt something like hope. The hearing was set for 10 o'clock in the magistrate's court, a wood-paneled room that smelled like old paper and older money. By 9:30 it was already packed. Word had spread. This wasn't just a legal proceeding anymore. It was entertainment. Ronan recognized faces from the dinner party, from the Ashford ball, from every corner of society that had been whispering about them. They'd come to watch the scandal unfold. Edmund sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, looking entirely too pleased with himself. Beside him, smug as a cat, was Celeste. She caught Ronan's eye and smiled. The magistrate entered. Magistrate Crawford, an older man with gray hair and a reputation for rigid adherence to law. He took a seat, surveyed the crowded room with obvious distaste, and called the proceedings to order. This is an inquiry into the validity of the engagement between Duke Ronan Blackthorne and Miss Elin Varel, specifically whether said engagement was entered into in good faith as required by the late Duke's will. Mr. Edmund Blackthorne has presented evidence suggesting fraud. We will hear arguments from both parties. Edmund's lawyer stood, launching into a prepared speech about timelines and suspicious circumstances and the damning evidence of Elin's letters. He painted a picture of a calculating woman who'd preyed on a vulnerable soldier, manipulating him into an engagement that served her purposes. It was brutal and effective. When he finished, the magistrate turned to Ronan. Duke Blackthorne, you may present your defense. Pembroke started to stand, but Ronan stopped him. I'll speak for myself, thank you. Pembroke sat back down, looking terrified. Ronan stood, facing the magistrate and the packed gallery. Your Honor, my cousin's lawyer just spent 20 minutes explaining why my engagement is fake. He used timelines and contracts and stolen letters to make his case. And you know what? He's not entirely wrong. Gasps from the gallery. Edmund's smile widened. The engagement did start as strategy, Ronan continued. I came home from war to find everything I'd fought for in ruins. My fiancée had abandoned me, my estate was bankrupt, and I had 1 year to marry or lose my inheritance. So yes, when I proposed to Elin Varel, it was partially motivated by survival. Elin, sitting at their table, had gone very still. But here's what my cousin's lawyer didn't tell you. While I was gone, Elin kept my house running. She paid staff out of her own dowry when there was no money left. She wrote me letters, 47 of them, that I never received because military censors decided unmarried women weren't important enough. She fought for a home that wasn't hers and a man who barely knew she existed. He turned to face the gallery directly. You want to call that manipulation? Fine. But I call it loyalty. I call it courage. And when I came home and saw what she'd done, when I realized that the only person who'd actually cared about preserving what I loved was this woman everyone had dismissed as unmarriageable, I made a choice. This is highly irregular, the magistrate started. I chose her, Ronan said over him, not because I was desperate, because she was real. Because in a world full of pretty lies and empty promises, she told the truth, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Edmund shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is nothing but emotional theater. Sit down, the magistrate said sharply. Then to Ronan, make your point quickly, Your Grace. Ronan looked at Elin. I'm not the one who needs to make a point. She is. Elin's eyes widened. She shook her head minutely. He held out his hand to her. Your turn. For a moment he thought she'd refuse. Then she stood, trembling, and walked to stand beside him. The courtroom went silent. Elin pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd carried through everything, and began writing. But instead of showing it to Ronan, she turned it toward the gallery, held it up high where everyone could see. My name is Elin Varel. I cannot speak, but I can write. and I have something to say." She lowered the notebook, wrote again, held it up. 3 years ago, when Duke Blackthorn left for war, I was nothing. The spare daughter, the broken one, the girl everyone pitied but nobody wanted. My sister was engaged to a duke and I was invisible. Another page. But when he left, I saw what happened. I saw the steward stealing, the staff leaving, the estate falling apart. And I thought, someone has to stop this. Someone has to fight. The room was utterly quiet, so I did. Not because I expected gratitude, not because I thought he'd notice, but because it was right. Because good people were bleeding for us, and the least I could do was protect what they were bleeding for. She was writing faster now, the pages turning quickly. I wrote him letters, told him about the roses and the repairs and the small victories. I didn't send them to manipulate him. I sent them because I thought he deserved to know someone remembered. Someone cared. Edmund tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, this is—" The magistrate silenced him with a look. "Let her finish." Ellen's hands were shaking, but she kept writing. Yes, I had feelings for him. Yes, I hoped he'd see what I'd done, but I never expected him to love me. I never expected anything except to do the right thing and disappear again when it was done. She turned the page. Then he came home, and he was drowning, and I was drowning. And we made a deal, strategic, practical, honest. Neither of us pretended it was romance. We both knew what it was, survival. Another page. But somewhere in the disaster, something changed. He defended me when no one else would. He trusted me with decisions. He looked at me like I mattered, and I started believing I did. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't stop. Is this engagement real? Yes. It wasn't at first, but it is now. We chose each other, not because we're perfect, but because we're honest. And if that's not enough for you, if you need fairy tale love to legitimize our choice, then you don't understand what love actually is. She held up the final page, her hand steady now. Love isn't what you feel in the beginning. It's what you build in the middle, in the fights and the failures and the moments when everything's falling apart. We built something real from nothing but desperation and honesty. That's more valid than 1,000 romantic proposals. She lowered the notebook, looking directly at the magistrate. The room erupted. People were talking, crying, arguing. Edmund was shouting something about procedure. His lawyer looked lost. But Magistrate Crawford just sat there, watching Elin with an unreadable expression. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. "Miss Verrill, you cannot speak?" She shook her head. "Yet you've communicated more clearly than most people I encounter in this courtroom." He looked at her thoughtfully. "These letters that were stolen, did you write them expecting Duke Blackthorn to read them?" Elin wrote quickly, "No. The military postal service rejected them. I kept writing because I needed to believe someone cared, even if he never knew." "And the engagement? When it was first proposed, did you agree for love or for practical reasons?" "Practical. I had no future otherwise. He had an inheritance deadline. It made sense." "And now?" Elin hesitated, then wrote slowly, "Now it's both. Practical and real. We need each other, yes, but we also choose each other. Every day." The magistrate turned to Ronan. "Duke Blackthorn, if this hearing rules against you, you lose your inheritance. Are you prepared to walk away from everything for this woman?" Ronan didn't hesitate. "Yes. Even though the engagement started as strategy? Especially because of that. She saw me at my worst and chose to help anyway. That's worth more than any inheritance." Crawford leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Mr. Edmund Blackthorn, you've presented evidence that the engagement began as a practical arrangement. Do you dispute that it has become something more?" Edmund stood, flustered. "Your Honor, feelings are irrelevant. The will specifies—" "I know what the will specifies. I'm asking if you dispute that their relationship has evolved beyond its original purpose." I don't see how that matters." "It matters because the law is meant to prevent fraud, not to punish honest evolution." Crawford looked at the stolen letters on his desk. "These letters show a young woman who cared deeply about a man's welfare with no expectation of return. That's not manipulation. That's selflessness." Edmund's face was turning red. "But the timeline shows two people making a practical choice during a crisis. then choosing to honor that commitment and build something genuine from it. That's precisely what marriage is supposed to be. The magistrate looked around the courtroom. Romance fades, passion dims, but partnership, built on mutual respect and shared purpose, that endures. He picked up his gavel. After reviewing the evidence and hearing testimony from both parties, I find no fraud in the engagement between Duke Ronan Blackthorn and Miss Elin Varel. The marriage, should it proceed, will fulfill the requirements of the late Duke's will. This inquiry is dismissed. The gavel fell. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the gallery exploded in applause. Not everyone. Edmund looked like he'd swallowed poison, and Celeste had gone pale. But enough people were clapping that it felt like victory. Ronan grabbed Elin, pulling her close. She was shaking, crying, laughing all at once. "We did it," he whispered into her hair. "We actually did it." She pulled back, writing quickly. "You did it. That speech. We both did it. You standing up there telling everyone the truth, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Lord Hastings pushed through the crowd, grinning. "Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Half the people in this room are going to be at your wedding now, just to see what happens next." "We're still having a wedding?" Elin wrote, showing it to Ronan. "Unless you've changed your mind?" She shook her head firmly. Wrote, "No. But maybe we can make it about more than just survival now?" "Yeah, I'd like that." They made their way out of the courtroom through a crowd that was equal parts congratulatory and scandalized. Edmund tried to block their path, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, cousin. You think you've won, but—" Ronan stopped walking. "Edmund, shut up. You can't talk to me. I just can. I won. You lost. And if you try anything else, I'll make sure every gentleman's club in the city knows about your gambling debts and your embezzlement attempts." He smiled without warmth. "Lord Hastings is very well connected. It would be a shame if your reputation was destroyed over sour grapes." Edmund opened his mouth, then closed it. He turned and stalked away. Celeste was waiting outside the courthouse. She looked smaller somehow, less polished. "Ronan, might I speak with you? Alone?" "No," Elin wrote immediately. But Ronan touched her arm. "It's okay. 2 minutes." Elin looked like she wanted to argue, but finally nodded and moved a few steps away. Celeste pulled him aside, her voice low. "I made a mistake. Helping Edmund, working against you, it was petty and cruel, and I'm sorry." "Why did you do it?" "Because—" She stopped, started again. "Because seeing you with her, seeing you happy, it made me realize what I'd thrown away. And I wanted to hurt you the way I was hurting." "That's honest, at least." "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What you have with Elin, it's real, more real than what we ever had." Ronan looked at his former fiancée and felt nothing. No anger, no longing, not even satisfaction at her admission. Just emptiness where she used to be. "I hope you find something real too," he said finally, "just not at someone else's expense." He walked back to Elin, offering his arm. She took it, writing, "What did she want?" "To apologize. It doesn't change anything." "No, it doesn't." They walked through the streets toward the carriage. People stared, whispered, but it felt different now. Less like judgment and more like curiosity. As they climbed into the carriage, Marcus grinned from the driver's seat. "Congratulations, Your Grace. Miss Varel. That was quite a show." "It wasn't a show," Ronan said. "Even better." The ride home was quiet. Elin sat across from Ronan, staring out the window at the passing city. Finally, she pulled out her notebook. "I meant what I said in there. About choosing you every day." "I know." "Do you? Because I need you to understand this isn't just about the inheritance anymore. It's not about survival. I'm choosing you because I want to. Because somewhere in this disaster, I fell in—" She stopped writing, scratched it out, started again. "Because I care about you. More than I probably should." Ronan crossed the carriage, sitting beside her. "For what it's worth, I care about you too. More than I definitely should after 3 weeks of knowing someone properly." She looked up at him, eyes red from crying. "We're a disaster," he said. "A complete disaster," she agreed. "But we're our disaster." "Yes." He kissed her then. Not desperate or strategic, but gentle. A promise that this was real, whatever this was becoming. When he pulled back, she was smiling, actually smiling, wide and genuine. She wrote, "So what happens now?" Now? Ronan thought about it. Now we get married. Build the estate into something worth having. Drive Edmund insane with our success. And probably scandalize society a few more times for good measure. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Elin considered, then wrote, "No. Let's do that." The carriage pulled through the gates of Blackthorn Estate. The house still looked half-ruined, the garden still overgrown, the fountain still dry. But as they climbed out and stood looking at it together, Ronan realized something. It didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like home. And standing beside him, ink-stained and stubborn and honest, was the woman who'd made that possible. 3 weeks until the wedding, he said. Elin wrote, "Think we can survive that long without another disaster?" "Absolutely not." "Good. I'd be bored otherwise." They walked toward the house together as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, painting everything gold. Behind them, in the courtroom they'd just left, people were still talking. The story was spreading, the Duke and the mute woman who'd turned scandal into something like triumph. But ahead of them was just the quiet promise of an afternoon spent fixing what was broken, building what needed building, and choosing each other in the middle of the mess. Which, Ronan thought, was the best kind of victory there was. The best kind of victory, Ronan discovered over the next 3 weeks, was the kind that came with a massive amount of work. Winning the hearing had saved the inheritance, but it hadn't magically fixed the estate. The debts were still there. The roof still leaked. The North Tower still looked like it might collapse if someone sneezed too hard near it. But now they had something they hadn't had before: momentum. Lord Hastings' investment came through 2 days after the hearing, real money, not promises. Enough to hire proper staff, start repairs, and begin harvesting the timber reserves. Ronan spent his mornings in meetings with contractors and his afternoons in the fields with workers, learning exactly how far behind they were on everything. Elin ran the household with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. She'd hired back some of the old staff who'd left, vetted new ones with brutal thoroughness, and created systems for everything from purchasing to maintenance. The ledgers she kept were works of art, every penny accounted for, every expense justified. They worked 16-hour days and collapsed into bed exhausted. It was the happiest Ronan had been in years. The wedding was set for Saturday. They debated canceling, there was too much to do, too many crises demanding attention, but Elin had written, "We need this, something good, something ours." So they pressed forward with plans that were modest by aristocratic standards and probably still too expensive by their actual budget. 5 days before the wedding, Ronan found Elin in the study at midnight, surrounded by seating charts. "You're supposed to be sleeping," he said. She didn't look up, just wrote, "Can't seat Lord Pemberton next to Lady Weatherby. They're feuding over a property dispute. Let them feud. It'll be entertainment. It'll be a disaster." She crossed out another arrangement, started over. "We're already scandalous enough without adding a brawl to the wedding breakfast." Ronan walked behind her chair, reading over her shoulder. "You've been working on this for 3 hours. How did you—" "The ink on your fingers changes color when it dries. You're up to 4 shades. He gently took the pen from her hand. "It's good enough. People will sit where they sit and complain regardless. That's what they do." She looked up at him, exhausted. Wrote, "I want it to be perfect." "Why? We're not perfect. The estate isn't perfect. Why should the wedding be?" "Because—" She stopped, started again. "Because I want them to see that we're serious, that this isn't a joke or a scandal, that we're building something real." "Elin," he knelt beside her chair, "they already know that. You stood up in court and told them. And even if they didn't believe it then, they'll believe it when they see what we've done with this place. We've barely started." "Exactly. We've barely started and already there are workers in the fields, repairs happening, money coming in. That's real. A seating chart is just paper." She managed a small smile, writing, "When did you become the practical one?" "When I realized my future wife was going to work herself to death over table arrangements." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on, sleep. That's an order. You can't order me around. I can when you're being ridiculous. She threw her pen at him. He caught it, grinning. They made it upstairs to their separate rooms. They'd maintained that propriety at least, though Ronan suspected it was more for the servants' sake than their own. At her door, Elin paused. She wrote, "I'm nervous. About Saturday." "Me too." "What if I mess up? Trip during the ceremony or drop something or…" "Then we laugh about it and keep going." He touched her face gently. "It's not a performance, remember? It's just us choosing each other in front of witnesses. That's what makes it terrifying." "I know. Sleep anyway." She nodded, disappearing into her room. Ronan made it to his own bed and lay there staring at the ceiling. His mind wouldn't stop racing. The ceremony, the guests, the money they were spending they couldn't quite afford, the 1,000 things that could go wrong. There was a soft knock on his door. "Come in." Elin slipped inside, carrying her notebook. In the dim light, she looked younger, vulnerable. She wrote, "Can't sleep." "Neither can I." "Can I stay? Just until I fall asleep? Not…" She gestured vaguely. "Just company." "Of course." She climbed onto the bed, sitting with her back against the headboard. Ronan sat beside her, not touching, just present. After a long silence, she wrote, "Tell me about the war. You never talk about it." "There's not much to tell." "Liar." He sighed. "What do you want to know? What kept you going? When it was bad, what did you think about?" Ronan considered lying, giving her something noble, but they'd built this relationship on honesty. "Honestly? Most days I thought about nothing. You just survive. Put one foot in front of the other. Follow orders. Try not to get killed." He paused. "But sometimes, when it was really bad, I'd think about home. Not as it was, but as I wanted it to be. Peaceful. Safe. Worth the bleeding. Did it live up to that? When you came back?" "No. It was worse than I'd imagined." He looked at her. "And then it got better. Because of you." She ducked her head, but he saw her smile. "I used to imagine what you were like," she wrote, "based on the few times we'd met. I built this whole person in my head, brave and noble and perfect. Sorry to disappoint." "You didn't." She showed him the next line. "You were better. You were real, flawed and angry and desperate. Human. I liked that better than perfect." Good thing, since perfect was never an option. They sat in comfortable silence. Eventually, Elin's writing hand slowed, then stopped. She'd fallen asleep sitting up, her head tilted against the headboard. Ronan carefully shifted her down onto the pillow, pulled a blanket over her. She murmured something, not quite words but close, and settled. He should wake her, send her back to her own room. Propriety demanded it. Instead, he lay down on the other side of the bed, a respectful distance away, and let himself fall asleep to the sound of her breathing. The morning of the wedding arrived with unseasonable sunshine and Ronan's complete certainty that something was going to go catastrophically wrong. It started with the flowers. The florist arrived 2 hours late, flustered and apologetic. Half the arrangements were wrong, roses instead of lilies, purple instead of white. Elin took one look at them and wrote, "They're fine." "Who cares?" "But you wanted…" "I wanted to marry you. The flowers are decoration." She showed the note to the florist. "These are beautiful. Thank you." Then the musician canceled, sick with some kind of flu that was going around. They scrambled to find a replacement and ended up with the church organist, who was approximately 90 years old and played everything at half speed. "It'll be fine," Ronan told Marcus, who looked like he was about to have a breakdown. "At this point, I'm just hoping the building doesn't collapse." "Don't say that, you'll jinx it." 30 minutes before the ceremony, Ronan was in a side room of the church trying to tie his cravat when someone knocked. "If this is another crisis, I don't want to know about it." The door opened. Lord Hastings walked in, looking amused. "Thought I'd check on the groom. You look like you're about to face a firing squad." "That would be less stressful." Hastings laughed. "Weddings are supposed to be joyful occasions, you know." "Weddings are expensive disasters waiting to happen." "True. But they're also beginnings." The older man pulled out a small box from his jacket. "I wanted to give you this. Call it an investment in your future." Ronan opened it. Inside was a ring, simple gold band, elegant without being ostentatious. "It was my wife's," Hastings said quietly. "She passed 5 years ago. Never had children to pass it on to, and I thought, well, Miss Verrill seems like the type of woman who'd appreciate something with history over something expensive. Ronan felt his throat tighten. I can't. You can. She was a fighter too, my wife. Came from nothing, built everything beside me. She would have liked your Elin. He clapped Ronan on the shoulder. You found something rare, son. Don't waste it worrying about flowers and musicians. After he left, Ronan stood holding the ring, feeling the weight of it. The history. The trust Hastings was placing in them. Another knock. Marcus this time. Sir, it's time. The church was packed. Ronan had expected maybe 50 people, close friends, family associates, the handful of society members who'd stood by them. Instead, there were easily 200 guests crammed into pews, spilling into the aisles. What? He started. Word got out, Marcus whispered. After the hearing, people wanted to see it. The scandal wedding that wasn't a scandal anymore. Great. No pressure. Ronan took his place at the altar, trying not to look at all the faces staring at him. He recognized Lord and Lady Pemberton, the Weatherbys, various business associates. Even some of the workers from the estate had come, standing in the back. And there, in the third row, looking distinctly uncomfortable, was Edmund. Beside him, even more uncomfortable, was Celeste. Of course they'd come. Couldn't miss the spectacle. The organist started playing, slowly, creakily, but with feeling. The guests rose. And then Elin appeared at the back of the church. She wasn't wearing white, said it felt presumptuous for a woman her age, for a marriage that had started as strategy. Instead, she wore deep blue silk that brought out her eyes. Her hair was up, simple and elegant. No veil, no jewelry except the silver bracelet she always wore. She looked terrified. She also looked beautiful. She walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no sister to support her. Just Elin, choosing to walk toward him of her own accord. Halfway down, she stumbled slightly. Someone in the crowd gasped. Elin caught herself, looked up, and caught Ronan's eye. He smiled at her, trying to project calm confidence he absolutely didn't feel. She smiled back and kept walking. When she reached the altar, she was shaking. Ronan took her hand. You okay? He whispered. She nodded, mouthed, terrified. Me too. The priest began the ceremony, the traditional words about love and commitment until death. Ronan barely heard them. He was too focused on Elin's hand in his, the way her fingers gripped tight like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. The vows came. Ronan spoke his clearly, meaning every word. Then it was Elin's turn. The priest hesitated. They'd discussed this. She couldn't speak the vows aloud. They'd arranged for Ronan to speak them on her behalf. But Elin shook her head. She pulled out a small card she'd prepared, handed it to the priest. He read it aloud, his voice carrying through the church. I, Elin Verrill, take you, Ronan Blackthorne, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you in disaster and triumph. I promise to tell you the truth, even when lies would be easier. I promise to fight for us when the world says we're not enough. I choose you. Every day, I choose you. The church was silent. Ronan felt his vision blur. He squeezed her hand. The priest cleared his throat. The rings. Ronan pulled out the band Hastings had given him. As he slid it onto Elin's finger, he whispered, it was his wife's. A fighter, he said, like you. Elin looked down at the ring, tears streaming down her face. She had a ring for him too, simple. Probably cost too much of their limited budget. Perfect. By the power vested in me, the priest said, I pronounce you husband and wife. Ronan kissed her before he'd finished speaking. Not perfectly, not gracefully. He misjudged the angle slightly and caught the corner of her mouth. But real. When they broke apart, the church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, while the ancient organist played something that might have been a celebration march if played at normal speed. Outside in the sunshine, guests crowded around offering congratulations. Some genuine, some clearly just there for the spectacle. Ronan shook hands and made small talk while Elin communicated through her notebook with surprising efficiency. Edmund and Celeste appeared as the crowd was starting to disperse toward the reception. Congratulations, cousin, Edmund said stiffly. Quite the performance. It wasn't a performance. Of course not. He looked at Elin. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into, Miss Var. Excuse me, Duchess Blackthorn. Elin pulled out her notebook, wrote quickly. I know exactly what I've gotten into. A partnership with someone who respects me. You should try it sometime. Edmund's face reddened, but before he could respond, Celeste stepped forward. Elin, might I speak with you, privately? Elin looked at Ronan. He nodded. I'll be right here. The sisters moved a few feet away. Ronan watched, ready to intervene if needed. Celeste was talking quietly, gesturing. Elin listened, her face unreadable, then pulled out her notebook. Whatever she wrote, it made Celeste go pale. She nodded, said something short, and walked away quickly. Elin returned to Ronan's side. He raised an eyebrow. She showed him what she'd written. She apologized, said she'd been cruel and petty and I deserved better. I told her I agreed on all counts and that I hope she finds someone who actually values her. Then I told her to leave us alone. That's generous. That's closure. She took his arm. Can we go to the reception now? I'm starving. The reception was held at the estate because despite everything, it was their home now. They'd set up tables in the garden, brought in temporary staff to serve food, hired musicians who could actually play at normal tempo. It should have been elegant. It was, instead, chaotic and wonderful. The food was good, but not spectacular. The musicians were enthusiastic, but not professional. One of the tables collapsed mid-meal when too many people leaned on it, sending plates crashing. Elin laughed, actually laughed, a sound Ronan had never heard her make before. Silent but genuine, her whole body shaking with it. This is a disaster, she wrote when she caught her breath. Complete disaster, he agreed. I love it. They danced, badly, just like at the Ashford ball. But this time, Ronan didn't care who was watching. He spun Elin around the makeshift dance floor while guests applauded and the sun set behind the house in shades of gold and orange. Lord Hastings pulled him aside later, glass of wine in hand. You've done well, Blackthorn, both of you. We've barely started. That's what I mean. Most people would have collapsed under the pressure. You two thrived. He looked around at the estate, the guests, the chaos. This is what success looks like, by the way. Not perfection, just people building something worth having despite the obstacles. Thank you for everything. The investment, the ring, the faith. Don't thank me. Just make it work. That's all the thanks I need. As evening fell, guests started departing. Some left genuine congratulations. Others left knowing looks, like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Finally, it was just Ronan and Elin standing in the garden, surrounded by the debris of the celebration. We did it, Ronan said. Elin wrote, We did. Now what? Now we live, build the estate, drive each other crazy, figure out what being married actually means. Sounds terrible. Probably will be. Good. She showed him the next line. I'd be bored with easy. They walked through the garden toward the house. Workers had started clearing tables, packing up the temporary structures. In a few hours, it would look like the reception had never happened. But it had. They'd claimed each other in front of everyone, made it official, legal, real. Inside, the house was quiet. Most of the staff had been given the evening off. Elin paused at the base of the stairs, wrote, I'm supposed to go to my room. You're supposed to go to yours. That's what propriety demands. Since when have we cared about propriety? She almost smiled. Good point. They climbed the stairs together. At her door, their door now, Ronan supposed, she turned to face him. I'm nervous, she wrote. About? Everything. Us. This. Being married. What if I'm terrible at it? Ronan took her hands. Then you'll be terrible at it and we'll figure it out together. That's the whole point. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. We keep choosing each other. We keep telling the truth. We keep fighting for this even when it's hard. What if it's too hard? Then we fight harder. He pulled her close. Elin, you kept an entire estate running through sheer stubbornness. You stood up in court and told everyone the truth. You married a broke duke everyone thought was desperate. You can handle being married to me. She rested her forehead against his chest, and he felt her shoulders shake with silent laughter. When she pulled back, she wrote, Okay, but if I mess this up, we'll mess it up together. Deal. A year later, Ronan stood in the same study where Edmund had tried to contest the inheritance, looking at ledgers that told a completely different story. The estate was profitable, not wildly so. They weren't going to rival the Ashford fortune anytime soon, but sustainable. The timber harvests had exceeded projections. The mineral rights were generating steady income. The tenant farms were producing again. They'd repaid half their debts, hired permanent staff, fixed the roof and the north tower and the fountain in the courtyard, which now caught rainbows again when the sun hit it right. Elin walked in, carrying a stack of correspondence. She set it on the desk, writing, "Lord Pemberton wants to discuss a joint venture on some property near the border." "What kind of venture?" "Agricultural. He thinks our approach to resource management could work on his land too." "What do you think?" She considered. "I think we should hear him out. But get everything in writing." "Always." "Also, Lady Weatherby wants to visit next week. Something about her daughter needing advice on estate management." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "Her daughter who mocked you at the Ashford ball?" "The same." Elin's expression was dry. Apparently success breeds interest. "Do you want to see her?" She shrugged, wrote, "Why not? Maybe she's actually interested in learning. And if not, at least I can enjoy the irony of her asking me for help." The doorbell rang. They looked at each other. "Expecting anyone?" Ronan asked. "No." Marcus appeared moments later, looking uncertain. "Your Grace, there's a young woman here. She says she's your cousin?" Ronan frowned. "I don't have a female cousin." "She said her name is Sarah Blackthorne. Claims her father was your Uncle Thomas?" "Uncle Thomas, who'd disappeared 20 years ago after a scandal involving gambling debts and a married woman. The family never talked about him." "Show her in." The young woman who entered looked about 20, wearing a travel-worn dress and carrying a single bag. She had the Blackthorne dark hair and sharp features. "Duke Blackthorne. I'm Sarah. I know we've never met, but She stopped, looking overwhelmed. "I didn't know where else to go. My father died 3 months ago, and I have no other family." Ronan and Elin exchanged glances. "Sit," Elin wrote, showing the note to Sarah. "Start from the beginning." Sarah's story came out in fits and starts. Her father had fled to the continent, married a local woman, had Sarah. He'd died leaving her with nothing. She'd spent the last of her money traveling back to England, hoping distant family might help. "I'm not asking for charity," she said quickly. "I can work. I'm good with numbers, administration. I just need a chance." Ronan looked at Elin. She was already writing. "We could use someone with administrative skills. The estate is growing. You'd take me in? Just like that?" Sarah looked between them, disbelieving. "Not just like that," Ronan said. "We'd need to verify your story, make sure you're legitimate. I have papers, documentation, my father's marriage certificate, my birth record, everything." Elin wrote, "Then we verify. If it checks out, you can stay. We'll find you work and a place to live." "Fair?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "More than fair. Thank you." After Marcus showed her to a guest room, Ronan turned to Elin. "We're collecting strays now? We were both strays once, remember?" "Fair point." She crossed to the window, looking out at the estate. The gardens were still a work in progress, but they were progress. The house still had flaws, but it was lived in, loved. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she wrote. "How do you mean?" "If Celeste hadn't left, if you'd come home to what you expected, if we'd never—" "Every day," Ronan said honestly. "And every day I'm grateful it worked out this way instead." She turned, skeptical. "Really? You're grateful your fiancé abandoned you and your estate was falling apart?" "I'm grateful it forced me to see what actually mattered, that it brought us together." He crossed to stand beside her. "Perfect circumstances would have given me a perfect marriage, but perfect marriages are boring. And they don't last. And imperfect marriages do. Ours will. Because we built it from disaster, not fantasy. We know exactly what we're getting into." Elin leaned against him, writing, "I never thought I'd be here. Running an estate, married, actually happy. It feels almost unreal. It's real. We made it real. We did, didn't we?" That evening, they hosted a small dinner, just Lord Hastings, a few business associates, and Sarah, who'd cleaned up and looked less overwhelmed. The conversation was easy, ranging from estate business to politics to the latest society scandals. At one point, Hastings raised his glass. A toast to Duke and Duchess Blackthorne, who proved that the best foundations are built from honest failure, not pretty lies. Everyone drank. Later, as they walked through the garden before bed, Elin wrote, "Do you think people still talk about us? The scandal?" "Probably. People always talk. Does it bother you?" "Not even a little." He stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. "Let them talk. We built something real from nothing. We turned betrayal into partnership, disaster into success. That's worth 1,000 perfect reputations." She looked up at him, this woman who'd been invisible for so long and now commanded respect everywhere she went, who couldn't speak but communicated more clearly than most people who could, who'd fought for him when no one else would. She wrote, "I love you. I don't think I've ever written that before." "You haven't. I've been waiting." "Were you ever going to say it first?" "Eventually, I was giving you space to figure it out." "That's very considerate." She showed him the next line. "I love you. Not because you saved me. I saved myself. But because you saw me when no one else did. Because you made space for me to be exactly who I am." Ronan pulled her close. "I love you too, even though you're stubborn and workaholic and terrible at delegating." She hit his arm, but she was smiling. They stood in the garden they'd reclaimed together, in front of the house they'd saved together, under stars that didn't care about scandal or propriety or any of the things society used to measure worth. "You know what the best part is?" Ronan said. "What?" "We get to do this for the rest of our lives. Build things, fix things, drive each other crazy." "That sounds exhausting." "It will be. Want to do it anyway?" Elin kissed him instead of writing an answer, which was answer enough. Inside the house, candles were being lit. Staff were finishing evening tasks. Sarah was settling into her new room, starting what would hopefully be a new life. The estate that had been dying when Ronan returned was alive again. Not perfect, it would never be perfect, but functioning, growing, becoming something neither of them had imagined when they'd made their desperate deal. They'd started with nothing but survival instincts and honest desperation. They'd built a partnership that transformed into love without either of them quite noticing when it happened. They'd faced down scandal and society and their own worst impulses, and they'd won. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. And in the end, Ronan thought, that was the only victory that actually mattered. Elin tugged his hand, pulling him toward the house, toward their life together, whatever it would bring. He followed her inside, closing the door behind them. The estate stood in the darkness, solid and enduring. And inside, two people who'd been written off as failures were building something that would last long after the gossip faded. A legacy built not on perfection, but on truth. Not on romance, but on respect. Not on what they were supposed to be, but on exactly who they were. The estate stood in the darkness, solid and enduring. And inside, two people who'd been written off as failures were building something that would last long after the gossip faded. A legacy built not on perfection, but on truth. Not on romance, but on respect. Not on what they were supposed to be, but on exactly who they were.